Middle East as Desert Shield. American forces there to liberate Kuwait and prevent further Iraqi aggression, especially the capture of the rich oil fields of Saudi Arabia. By mid-January, Desert Storm was raging. Saddam's Scud missiles were launched at innocent Israeli residents in Tel Aviv. And at the request of the United States, Israel held back its defense forces and did not retaliate. 100 hours later, Kuwait had been liberated, Baghdad was in ruin, and thousands of Iraqi soldiers had surrendered. U.S. forces prepared to come home as conquering heroes.
The war is over.
The Desert Storm had passed, but it did not end the stormy cycle of events in the Middle East. While many Americans view the Middle East struggle as a mysterious tangle of ancient feuds and fighting, most realize the State of Israel came into being because much of the world believed the Jewish people needed a homeland, their own original homeland. They needed a homeland as a hedge against another attempt to annihilate them. Who can forget the systematic genocide of the Nazis? 1/3 of the world's Jewish population was killed. And except for a few friends of the Jews who tried to hide them, no nation acted to save them. 5 wars, none of Israel's choosing, have been launched by the Arabs with the expressed purpose of destroying the tiny nation. In the 4 decades since its founding, Israeli men and women have been called to fight and die in these wars to defend their homeland. Israel is still technically at war with her Arab neighbors. Except for Egypt, no one has signed a peace treaty with her. The price that Israel has already paid for peace is high, and the price that Israel is being asked to pay, in fact being pressured to pay, in terms of security concessions, is much higher.
Truthfully,
Israel's deputy foreign minister in this exclusive interview for Voices United for Israel explains why the winds of recent change in the Middle East could once again leave the Jewish state fighting for survival alone, unless Israel's friends come to her defense.
Shalom. This is Frieda Keat speaking to you from Jerusalem. On behalf of Voices United for Israel, it is my very special privilege and pleasure to introduce to you someone who, as the expression goes, really needs no introduction at all, the Deputy Foreign Minister of Israel, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Netanyahu, thank you so very much for being with us. You have for years now been engaged in the very forefront of Israel's battle for public relations, what we call Hasbara, explaining, defending, championing Israel in the outside world, trying to win for Israel friends and support. Why is it that Israel, alone among the nations it seems, feels the need to seek out and encourage this kind of support?
Well, Israel didn't have to seek out this kind of support during the first 19 years of its life, because the campaign was quite clear. The Arabs were bent on annihilating us, and everyone in his right mind supported us and not them. What has happened since the 1967 war, since the Six-Day War, is that the Arabs have disguised what they seek to do, and they said, well, we don't want to destroy Israel. What we want is simply to get back the territories that they actually lost in the war of aggression, trying to annihilate us. That's false. That's not what they want. But they have built up a case that has reversed causality. They have said that these territories are the cause of the conflict and not its result. And much of the world has gone on to believe them. So we have had, since the 1967, since the Six-Day War, we really have had to launch a campaign to reverse this lie and to put forward the truth. And for that we need help. We don't have 21 Arab countries. We don't have 21 Arab embassies with infinite money to press this public opinions claim, this false claim. We have only the truth and our friends, Jews and non-Jews, who are supportive of Israel and supportive of the truth, and we need their help in this urgent battle.
We in Israel and in the Jewish world in general complain bitterly, and we suffer great distress at what seems to us to be highly distorted reporting, usually negative, about Israel in the world media. It seems to disregard entirely the very great dangers and difficulties that Israel faces. What do you think are the most blatant areas of misreporting or misrepresentation or just plain misunderstanding in the way that Israel is presented in the media?
Well, I think that there have been three great canards, great lies, big lies when it comes to Israel. The first is that the core of the problem in the Middle East, the way they put it, is the so-called Palestinian problem, which means Israel's control of Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. That's a code word. That is false. I've said before that our presence there is a result of a war that the Arabs forced upon us and not its cause. But equally, the Arab campaign against Israel is born of the fact that the Arabs persistently refuse, to recognize Israel in any boundary. The only exception so far is Egypt. And I think beyond that, when you look at the problem of the Middle East, you should look at the problems of the Middle East. There are so many conflicts, Arab and Arab, Muslim and Muslim. We've just had a war in which Iraq, an Arab country, attacked Kuwait, an Arab country, and threatened to devour a third Arab country, Saudi Arabia. That's got nothing to do with Israel, as do the myriad conflicts between the Arabs and themselves. So the real core of the problems in the Middle East is the presence of dictators and terrorists and the total absence of democracy. I think it's time that the world understood what the core problem is and demand for reformation in the Arab world. That's the first lie. The second lie has to do with the fact that they say, well, they'll tell you, all right, so the Palestinian problem isn't the core of the conflicts in the Middle East, but nevertheless it's a problem. So why don't you just hand over this territory to the PLO? After all, the PLO wants peace. They don't want peace. We know what they want. Just a few weeks ago, they were steering the missiles of Saddam Hussein in undertaking to launch a war of terror on behalf of Saddam against Americans and others. What the PLO wants is what Saddam wants. They want the elimination of Israel. And this is a very long tradition. It goes back to the 1920s. The mentor of Yasser Arafat, he himself says, is the Mufti of Jerusalem, who in the 1930s made a pact with Hitler to annihilate the Jews. He was followed by Ahmed Shukeri, the predecessor of Arafat, who made a similar pact with Nasser to destroy the Jews. And now it goes to Yasser Arafat, who made the final pact with Saddam Hussein to destroy the Jews. If it's up to the PLO, there'll never be peace, because what they want is to destroy the Jews. They should be simply put out. They're not a partner for peace. That's the second lie that has been put forward. And the third and final lie is, well, all right, okay, so the Palestinian problem is not the core of the problem, and the PLO may not want peace, but what have you got to lose? Risk it. After all, territory doesn't count. It's just a few miles. Territory does count. It counts more than ever in the age of missiles, because when these missiles hit Israel, it can obstruct the time that we need to mobilize our 3/4 of the army, which is reservists. It could take us a week instead of 2 to 3 days. Imagine starting that war and starting that mobilization on the suburbs of Tel Aviv or on the banks of the Jordan. It makes a hell of a difference. In fact, it makes all the difference. So I think these three great lies, that the PLO wants peace, that the core of the problem is the Palestinian problem, and that territory doesn't count, these are the three untruths that have to be corrected. And they cannot be corrected by individual spokesmen alone. They must be taken up by an army of soldiers for truth. And I hope that the people who are listening to this will become soldiers in the most crucial battle of all, the battle for truth.
I know that this is a very vast subject, but perhaps just in very broad terms, you could try to explain why it is that we perceive that Israel is constantly under negative attack. You know, nations get away with murder, mayhem, massacre. The world was very largely indifferent to Saddam Hussein gassing his own Kurdish citizens. But every incident in Israel comes under immediate, harsh, and usually negative scrutiny. It's like the world has this knee-jerk, automatic, unthinking set of harsh responses for everything that happens here. Why is that so?
Well, I'm not sure it's the world. I think it's some of the media elites of the world and possibly some of the foreign chancelleries and ministries. I think my feeling is, and based on reactions that I've been getting from citizens from all over the world, is that the man in the street, so to speak, or the man before the tube, even the man before these hostile and often prejudicial television sets, has a pretty good feeling of who is the who is right and who is wrong. And Israel enjoys a lot of support in the broad stream. But you're quite right, there is an adverse attitude towards Israel on the part of the elites in many parts of the world. Why is that? It's a combination of things. It could be the post-Vietnam syndrome, the application of the colonialist model where it doesn't belong. Who are the colonialists here? The Jews or the Arabs? Who conquered all of North Africa, brutalized peoples? Who conquered the Middle East? Who went insofar as to Europe and in the gates of Paris? It's the Arabs. And I suppose there is a large process of decolonizing the Arab conquests. And that is what Israel is doing when it comes back to the ancient homeland, which was left barren by the Arabs, left unpopulated. When my great-grandfather came here almost 100 years ago, believe me, there were very few Arabs. There was nothing here. And we built it up, and the Arabs migrated as a result, many of the Palestinians who were here. Well, people forget that history. And I suppose that the elites in particular are susceptible to slogans and not to a tough scrutiny of the facts. I think, too, there is perhaps a problem with Jewish power. We are a people that have been accused of being, or used to being, victims for several millennia. We've paid the most horrendous price in the history of man and nations for this. And I guess people have got used to the idea, well, the Jew is all right as a victim, but if the Jew seizes or uses power to defend himself, there must be something wrong there. And I think that that is an adjustment that will take some time for the world to adjust to. And thirdly, I think that in addition to everything else, there is a battle going on, and the Arabs have understood this. That is the battle of propaganda, the battle of falsehood that they are trying to impose. That is something that they have seized the initiative on, and we have been slow and laggard in responding to by exposing these falsehoods. I think it's never too late.
Voices United for Israel is a friendship organization. It's made up of Jews and Christians. It's non-political, non-denominational, interdenominational. It's just ordinary American men and women of goodwill who understand the meaning of Israel and who are committed to Israel's security and survival. Now, it's obvious that we would reach out to the Jewish world for such support, but why reach out to the Christian world? What can Israel ask from Christians? What can we expect from them?
I think that we can ask from any civilized person, Jew or Christian, for that matter Muslim. I even got one or two letters from Pakistan from people who have sort of rethought things recently. It's very clear that there is a nation here, a small nation, I think a brave nation, that is fighting for its life. But I would not seek out the support of the people watching this program if it were only that. I think that the story of Israel, the odyssey of the Jewish people, is really a barometer for the world's hope. I think that if Israel can make it, if a people that has been decimated and oppressed and tortured and torn and killed, we are a people that has been used to being killed for many millennia. If this people can rise from the dust and refashion its life and create a sovereignty here in its ancient homeland and rebuild it, and bring life where there was no life, and roll back enemies 100 times our size, and stand up to the Saddams, the Gaddafis, the Arafats, the Khawatmirs, I think there is a larger message here of hope for all of humanity. Because I think our history over the last centuries has been the history of the battle of freedom against the tyranny, the tyrannies, I should say, of the world. And in this contest between freedom and tyranny, Israel stands at the forefront, however maligned, however distorted. This is the real meaning of Israel's adventure. And that's why I hope that the champions of freedom and the champions of truth will stand by her at this crucial time.
That really brings me to the final question, Mr. Netanyahu, and in fact you've probably answered it. How would you like Israel to be portrayed? How would you like the outside world to understand Israel and to look at Israel?
Truthfully, just truthfully.
Mr. Netanyahu, thank you so very much for being with us. And on behalf of Voices United for Israel, this is Frida Keet in Jerusalem, wishing you all, and to Israel, peace. Shalom.